subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.
My name is Clark. I am 76. I live in a house that I once built myself, brick by brick, slab by slab. Life used to be bustling here, children's laughter, the smell of dinner, my wife's heavy footsteps in the hallway. Now there is only the rustling of trees outside the window and the creaking of an old clock on the wall. My house stands on the outskirts of town, as if the world had deliberately pushed me away, like an unnecessary thing in the backyard of life. Every morning I get up at 6:15, because the body remembers discipline, even when the soul has long lost its rhythm. I drink tasteless coffee and look out the window, where night turns into day as indifferently as the people change their faces around me. In the yard there is a bench where I once sat with my wife. She died 3 years ago, and the bench has been empty since then. As have I. My children are both successful. The son has his own company, the daughter has a clinic. They have everything: money, status, big houses, cars, children. Everything, except the desire to come to their father at least once a month. They call, when they need to sign some documents. Or if they need advice somewhere that you can't find on Google. Then I say, "Dad, give me advice." And the rest of the time, there's dead silence. The grandchildren. They grow up like strangers. They don't ask how I am. They are annoyed by my presence. They laugh when I don't understand new words. Starpur, the eldest once said when I got the name of a computer game wrong. I smiled in response, but something inside snapped. Like a thin thread that held my patience. I've never allowed myself weakness. But now, weakness lives in me. In the store, the saleswoman puts away her change silently. She doesn't look up. As if I'm an empty space. They pass me by in lines, as if I were transparent. In the clinic, the doctor interrupts, not listening, and says, "So, age, Grandpa, what do you want?" I want, to be heard. Just to be heard. But even that is a lot. Sometimes I go to the park, not to rest, but to remind myself that life exists. I sit on a bench, look at the children, at the youth. And I catch glances at me, not interested, not kind, no. Condescending, contemptuous, pitiful. Like, "Look, the old man is sitting, apparently nobody needs him." Yes. Nobody needs me. I don't say it out loud. But when evening hides the city behind a curtain of fog, I sometimes sit down at the table and write. Not letters. Not poems. I keep a diary. Dry, emotionless. Names, dates, events. Not out of love for history, out of the need to remember. Because memory is the only thing I have left. And it hurts. In the middle of the night I wake up from the oppressive silence. And it seems to me that the house is breathing. It knows that I am still here. That I have not yet broken. But the crack has already gone. Every morning I feel it growing. I was a man of honor. My word mattered. When I spoke, they listened. When I acted, they respected. Now I am silent. But something dark is growing inside. Slowly. Like a shadow that stretches from the past. A shadow that has not forgotten. And you know what is the most terrible thing? Not pain, not loneliness. But indifference. When you are not hated, not loved, not expected, they simply do not notice. This is a slow death. And I see it every day in the mirror. But in the mirror there is still a man left. Tormented, hunched, wrinkled, but not destroyed. Not quite. Not yet. I often sit in my chair by the window and close my eyes. Not to sleep. I look deep down, to where the fragments of the real me still remain. The Clark, who was feared, respected, listened to. Time has erased the wrinkles of memory, but has not destroyed it. I was 25 when I first stepped onto the concrete site where work was to begin. An empty lot, a backpack over my shoulders, nothing in my pocket, except for the idea that would become the foundation of the business. I worked not for hours, for days. I built from scratch. By myself. Then, with a team that I assembled and trained. I did not steal, did not lie, did not flatter. I had honor. And honor, it does not make life easier, but it makes you worth living. At 36 I had 3 workshops, several facilities around the city, and a bunch of enemies who could not break me. Because I was not afraid of dirt, I grew out of it. At 40, I was an advisor to the mayor. They knew me by sight, my name was in the newspapers. But never in scandals. Because I held my own. And my own. And at home, it was warm at home. Marta was my support. Not a decoration, but an ally. We went through deprivation, through the loss of a child, through the betrayals of friends. She didn't leave when I had nothing. And her heart didn't grow proud when everything appeared. She gave birth to 2 children for me. And I decided, they wouldn't know the cold like I did. They would have everything they needed. I worked for 3 so that they could choose. They chose. Careers. Ambitions. A life in which there was no place for me. I remember standing in the rain when my son got married. I stood with a glass in my hand, watching them laugh, hug, and welcome their new family. And more than once I caught myself saying, "Clark, you're getting in the way, can you step aside?" No one said it out loud, but I heard it. I had friends. Most of them left when the business went down. Others are growing old in their apartments, and we sometimes call each other, say, "Hold on, buddy." But even these calls are getting rarer. Because what new can we say? And then Martha died. And I was left alone. The children were at the funeral. They said the right words. But there was cold in their eyes. They already had their own families. They didn't want to remember that their father could cry. And all that was left to me from that past was a box of photographs, an old business card, and memories that cut the soul like a blade. Because the scariest thing is to realize that everything you built, everything you sacrificed yourself for, has become useless to anyone. Powder. I once had an office. A leather chair, an oak table, a map of the city on the wall. Now it's a small room with the smell of old medicine and a cracked windowsill. My table is a kitchen table, and my chair has a broken leg that I put under a book so it doesn't wobble. I don't cry. Never. But there are moments when the air becomes too heavy and my heart beats like in prison. Not from pain. From powerlessness. Because how do you explain to your grandson that a grandfather, whom he considers pathetic, could once stop the city with a single call? I lived in a world where words meant more than money. And now they don't even listen to me when I talk. But I remember everything. I remember everyone who laughed when I fell. I remember who I signed a loan for, who promised me, who quit during the most difficult years. I didn't learn from books. And now I'm learning again. But not about business. About indifference. About contempt. About what the world looks like when you're no longer needed. And, something is being born in me again. Not bright. Not heroic. No. But very alive. Deep. Dark. And I don't know yet what it will do to me. But it has already awakened. I'm not asking for much. Just a little humanity. But that's probably what people are missing the most right now. Last winter, I asked my son to help fix the roof. The snow was seeping into the cracks, the wooden beams were starting to darken, and I'm not the type to climb up there with a hammer. I have tenders, Dad, maybe next week, he wrote back in a messenger. The next week passed. 2 passed. I repaired the roof myself. I fell. I broke my arm. My daughter called a month later, found out that there was an injury, and said dryly, "I should have called a handyman." Why did you even climb up? Because I'm still alive, damn it. Because I'm not 17, but I'm not a corpse either. But they don't care. For them, I'm a project that's long been completed. A museum piece in my own house. My granddaughter once stayed with me for the weekend. I made her favorite pancakes, which I used to make for her mother. She took one in her hands, sniffed it, and said, "Grandpa, this is somehow old. You smell of old age." She didn't even say it angrily. Just as a fact. And I smiled as best I could. And then I went out into the yard and stood in the rain for a long time until my shirt stuck to my body. It was cold, yes. But not like inside. One day I went to the clinic, problems with blood pressure. The doctor, a young man, didn't even look up from his computer. "So, what's wrong with you, Grandpa?" "Well, blood pressure." "So what did you want, age?" "Let's prescribe some more pills, you'll swallow them like candy." And then he told the nurse, not hiding it, "These old people again, they don't need treatment, they just need someone to listen to them." Yes. I needed someone to listen to me. Not because of the pressure. Because of the silence. Because it suffocates. I started writing. Not just memories. I started writing down facts. Names. Dates. Events. Everything that hurt. Everything that left a scar. As if I was creating a map of my oblivion. April 2nd. My son didn't answer the phone. I called 4 times. April 13th. My grandson sneers, "Grandpa, are you still watching the VCR?" May 1st. At the store, the cashier said, "Don't you have any change," without even looking me in the eye. June 8th. The doctor said, "Why do you need those tests anymore, you won't have time to take them, maybe next time," and laughed. My diary became a repository for wounds. Not poetic ones, but precise ones. Because I remember. And also, I knew how to analyze. I once built a business on people. And on what they hide. This ability doesn't disappear with age. It just slumbers. Like a tiger behind a shutter. Quiet. Patient. The climax came on the most ordinary day. I went to the store. I bought a few products, bread, canned fish, milk. The bags were heavy, and I stopped by a bench to rest. I saw 2 guys, about 20, sitting, smoking. I went up and said, "Guys, help me carry the packages, I'm asking you." One of them smiled. But not in a friendly way. "What, Grandpa, you've already worked your legs, right? Maybe you should give your pension away." Another added, "You'd better not hang around here. All the old people are just waiting to whine." I stood there. My hands were shaking, the packages fell. The milk spilled on the asphalt. And they laughed. One even picked up the phone and took a picture. I saw myself through their eyes, worthless, humiliated old man with stains on his pants and wet eyes. But something clicked. No, not anger. Cold. Silence. Deep, absolute. As if the blood had frozen. As if time had stopped, and someone else had crawled out of the darkness. The one I was, but didn't allow myself to be. The one who remembers every insult. Who doesn't scream, but waits. Plans. Acts. I picked up the packages. Slowly. I looked them in the eyes. And didn't say a word. Just smiled. Very slowly. They fell silent. That evening, the silence in my house was no longer empty. It breathed with me. It no longer scared. Because I was no longer a victim. After that evening, I was no longer the same. And not because something had changed on the outside, no. On the outside, everything remained as it was, the peeling walls of the house, the silent children, the indifferent faces in the pharmacy. But something had changed inside me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel weak. Old age is not the end. It's a pause. And in that pause, something else is born. Not tenderness, not a tear, not a request. But a tool. A mechanism. A machine with a memory for wounds and the precision of a surgeon. I sat in my office, the same old, cluttered one where I used to do my calculations, and spread out my diary in front of me. Next to each entry, a name. Next to each name, a thought. Not as a punishment. But as a way to make you feel. The same me. The same emptiness. The same oblivion. There was no anger in me. Anger is weakness. I was empty, like a bottomless well. And from that emptiness a plan emerged. Simple. Without a trace. Without a scream. Silence is the best sound for revenge. I started small. I reconnected with some old contacts from the days when I was in power. One old accountant, now a consultant at a large firm. One IT specialist who once helped me launch the security system. One journalist who once interviewed me and now runs a blog. They all remembered me, and they all still had debts. Not monetary. Moral. I knew how to activate them. I found out that my son was keeping double-entry bookkeeping. No wonder, I taught him. I simply made sure that the anonymous letter got into the right hands. The tax office. A week later, his company was audited. A month later, 2 contracts were taken away. He called me. For the first time in a long time. He didn't ask, he told. I listened. I nodded. I smiled. For the first time in many years, I was sincere. My daughter is a brilliant doctor, but her clinic had some licensing violations. I just shared an old document with a blogger who was preparing a series of exposés. No one said it was me. She found it herself. My daughter cried into the phone, saying it was a conspiracy. And I calmly replied, "You always said I was too old to understand anything." See, I still navigate in schemes. My grandson, the one who made fun of me, ended up without a scholarship. It turned out that his coursework had been written off from an old forum. No one knows who sent the letter to the faculty administration. But I remember once checking the contracts of my subordinates in the same way, word for word. And I knew where to look to find it. Every action was precise. Cold. Not accidental. Everything looked like a coincidence. Like a failure. Like a simple mistake. But I knew it was a game. And I was its architect. In the evenings I sat in silence. But now silence was my ally. It didn't suffocate, it whispered. Remember how they insulted you? Remember how I was silent? Now, they will be silent. Their silence is my victory. I didn't feel joy. It wasn't euphoria. It was return. Justice, without embellishment. Without kindness. Without apologies. Just balance. The old world order. Something that no one else taught, and I remembered. And one more thing, I didn't do it maliciously. I was just showing everyone a mirror. And forcing them to look. My son saw himself as cruel and careless. My daughter, indifferent and irresponsible. My grandson, arrogant and stupid. And everyone who thought I was worthless, now saw me. Not directly. But felt my presence. In their failures, in fear, in suspicion. And I was in the shadows. And no one thought it was me. Because who can think of an old grandfather in a greasy coat, feeding birds and smiling in a pharmacy? They all learned. Through pain, through loss, through doubt. I taught them to respect. Not with force, but with intelligence. With grace. Because I am not a scream. I am a silence that remembers. I sit on the same bench near the house. The boards are old, the paint is peeling, but the bench is holding up, as am I. The air is clean, cold. The morning seemed quiet, only the wind plays with the dry leaves underfoot. I peer down the road, which is rarely walked on. It's probably a good thing that it's rare. Because now I see people differently. And people feel it. The days have changed. Not abruptly. Not suddenly. But gradually, like a tide that approaches the shore without rushing, knowing that it will cover you anyway. My son now calls more often. Not every day, but once a week, consistently. He speaks carefully, as if he's afraid to ask how I am. And I hear in his voice something I haven't heard in years: respect. Not love, no. Love doesn't come back so easily. But respect, it's back. Because he knows that the world can crack where he thought he was standing on rock. My daughter has also become softer. She came unexpectedly, brought some medicine, a new blanket. She said she was worried. I listened. I nodded. I looked into her eyes and saw that she was no longer looking down on me. Maybe she realized that even old age can be stronger than her clinic or status. Grandson. He can't forget what happened with the scholarship. And I don't demand that he forget. Because sometimes a person grows not from praise, but from pain. He now greets quietly, not rudely. He asks how he is. Clumsily, awkwardly, but he asks. And there is something more in this awkwardness than in all those years of indifference. Maybe he will still become a person. The city. The city has changed too, although it doesn't know it. In the store, the cashier now looks me in the eye. They don't interrupt at the pharmacy. The doctor speaks respectfully, even though he pretends that this is just a new standard of care. People on the street, they sense something else in me. Not weakness. Not a request. But a silence that can respond. I am not a hero. I am not a saint. And not an executioner. I am an old man who has lived his whole life for others. I was a support. I was a strength. I was a foundation. And when the foundation collapsed, no one came. So I did what I had to do. Not to break. But to teach. So that the world would look in the mirror and see that indifference is also a crime. Without screaming, without blows, without blood. I did not want to destroy. I wanted to remind. Old age is not humility. And not submission. It is a right. The right to dignity. The right to memory. And the right to respond if you are erased from life like dust from a table. Now they do not applaud me. They do not thank me. They do not praise me. But no one dares to laugh anymore when I walk down the street. No one talks to me in the same tone as they talk to trash anymore. No one pretends I'm not there anymore. Sometimes I wonder what's next. Will it stop in me? Will the shadow that woke up when the boys laughed at my bag stay forever? It probably won't sleep again. But now it doesn't want revenge. Only peace. It stands by me like a guardian. Like a part of me that was born too late, but just in time for me to not disappear. I don't need their sorry. I don't look for their repentance. The very fact has taught them that old age is not a sentence. But a strength they underestimated. Now, as I sit on the bench, the wind brings silence. But this silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. Because I have proven that even a shadow can have power. That a person remains a person until they are broken. And if they are broken, they can become more dangerous than anyone thinks. I have not forgiven. But I have not destroyed. I have only settled the score. And for the first time in many years, I do not feel lost. But alive.